Hey, so this story came out as I was about to upload my initial video. So I'm recording this bit after shooting that video, but the video still applies because as you're going to see in the video, I discuss this. This report here from the New York Times, staffing was not normal at Reagan Airport Tower, according to FAA report. The report reviewed by the New York Times said that one controller was communicating with both helicopters and planes. Those jobs are typically assigned to two people, not one. Like most of the country's air traffic control facilities, the tower at Reagan Airport has been understaffed for years. The tower there was nearly a third below targeted staff levels, with 19 fully certified controllers as of September 2023. The shortage caused by years of employee turnover and tight budgets, among other factors, has forced many controllers to work up to 6 days a week and 10 hours a day. So, underfunded, understaffed. This is a major issue within aviation safety. I'm going to be honest with you. This shit is exhausting, and I don't even really want to talk about this. But I'm going to because I think it's important to lay out what exactly people are going to be dealing with for the next 4 years. So, following the tragic collision between a commercial airliner and a military helicopter, Donald Trump is now using this opportunity to attack minorities. So, before I get to some of the clips here, I'm also, by the way, later in this video, going to get to a note that I came across from a pilot that was shared with a journalist that gets to the heart of what is wrong or potentially what will be wrong with commercial flight going forward. So wait for that. But I want to first show you just largely how the media is discussing this because I think it's important to reframe this because, as I've discussed a million times, framing is everything. It's not that these outlets are spreading misinformation or trying to lie to you, but it's how they frame stories and how you come away feeling after reading them or reading the headline. So in this case, New York Times headline here: President Biden, or sorry, President, living in a different era. President blames DEI and Biden for crash under Trump's watch. So this is typically how people are seeing this. Oh, the president is blaming DEI. Well, I saw this from David Mack here, and this is such a great point. He writes, the headline is not, quote, Trump blames deadly plane crash on DEI, but, quote, Trump seizes on deadly plane crash to attack minorities. He goes on to say here, one is stenography, the other is journalism. He admitted he has no evidence, so if you're going on facts, the only thing we know for sure is that he's seizing an opportunity. This is such a great point, because if you just write out what Trump is doing without the context, and again, yes, they give context later on in the story, but the headline should tell you what the story is generally. The story isn't that Trump is blaming DEI. The story is that Trump is using this opportunity to attack minorities. Now, this gets to the clip here, and I'm going to get some context as well around someone that was recently fired or pushed out of their position.
We must have only the highest standards for those who work in our aviation system. I changed the Obama standards from very mediocre at best to extraordinary. You remember that. Only the highest aptitude, they have to be the highest intellect and psychologically superior people were allowed to qualify for air traffic controllers. That was not so prior to getting there. When I arrived in 2016, I made that change very early on because I always felt this was a job that, and other jobs too, but this was a job that had to be superior intelligence, and we didn't really have that, and we had it. And then when I left office and Biden took over, he changed them back to lower than ever before.
Ah, yes, of course. When Biden came in, he was like, you know what? The standards to be a pilot, to be an air traffic controller, they're too high. We must have more idiots in these positions, please. What is he arguing here? What he is arguing, the argument he is trying to make, is DEI has lowered the standards. This is what you're going to see over the next 4 years. Is every problem that comes up, every tragedy, anything that happens before there's any investigation into anything, they're going to blame diversity. They're going to essentially blame people who aren't white men. That's what this is. This is just, these are Nazis. If you're not a white man, that's the problem. It's because you're black, because you're gay, because you're a woman, That's why it happened. It is crazy. And what's amazing about all this is they're going to continue doing this despite the fact that he has his whole anti-DEI initiative, signed that executive order. They're going to continue blaming DEI even though he is president. Because the one rule about being a Republican is that you must always play the victim regardless of the facts. Facts like this. The FAA administrator quit on January 20th after Elon Musk told him to resign. Why did Elon Musk tell him to resign? Because the FAA proposed civil penalties against Elon Musk's company, SpaceX, for allegedly failing to follow its license requirements during 2 launches in 2023. Because they weren't following safety protocol, they were going to face civil penalties. Quote, failure of a company to comply with the safety requirements will result in consequences. And because Trump is running an oligarchy and Elon Musk has the power he has, he pushed this guy out. I'm going to get to that note I mentioned from that pilot, but just to spoil it a little bit, it has to do with capitalism. It has to do with private interests injecting themselves into aviation standards. So it's also worth mentioning this, so that this has more to do with security, but regardless, Trump, this is a week ago, Trump guts key aviation safety committee, fires heads of TSA, Coast Guard. So, as they write here, the committee will technically continue to exist, but it won't have any members to carry out the work of examining safety issues at airlines and airports. Now, again, this has more to do with safety. The investigation into this collision is still ongoing. I'm not going to put blame and say, "Oh, it's because he did this." Like that's no. This has more to do with the TSA. But regardless, just this idea that he cares so much about safety that he gutted the key aviation safety committee. So just to be clear, before Tuesday, the group included representatives of all key groups in the industry, including the airlines and major unions, as well as members of a group associated with the victims of the Pan Am 103 bombing. The vast majority of the group's recommendations were adopted over the years, clearly lowering standards for flying. And he's claiming it's never been higher. We have the highest aptitude. Just a clown. I don't want to subject you to too much, Trump. I could play this one in the window just quickly
DEI
here.
And the claims that you've made, are you saying this crash was somehow caused and the result of diversity hiring? And what evidence have you seen to support these claims?
It just could have been. We have a high standard. We've had a much higher standard than anybody else. And there are things where you have to go by brain power. You have to go by psychological quality. And psychological quality is a very important element of it. These are various very powerful tests that we put to use, and they were terminated by Biden. And Biden went by a standard that's the exact opposite. So
It's just so dumb. There was, to be clear as well, there hasn't been uh, an accident like this for I think about 15 years. I think it was 2009 was the last one. Uh, so standards have been high. Like it's not like flying as frightened as I am of it often. It's actually pretty safe, and there's tens of millions of flights that have no issues. But the idea that Biden or Obama or Democrats, they wanted to lower the standards for safety is completely counter to the truth. Because people like Trump and Republicans, and can argue Democrats as well, but care about corporate interests. Republicans to a much higher degree. That's all they care about is capitalism, capitalist interests. I mean, look at his cabinet. Look at the billionaires at his inauguration. That's all they care about. That means they want to serve them through deregulation. That is often a major element of conservative administrations, be it Democrat or Republican, is deregulation to benefit the wealthy. So this idea that standards were lowered and that Trump is hiring the standards that would require him to regulate massive companies, which he is not going to do. So it's just so stupid. Evan making a good point here. These people are Nazis, finding an oppressed group to blame literally every problem in society on is what the Nazis did. Yep. So this is the note that I want to share here. Ken Klippenstein, who's a fantastic journalist, definitely follow him because he's always putting out stuff that is worth a read. But he got this tip from an airline pilot. I'm going to read through this. This is worth mentioning here. So he says, "Hi, Ken. I'm a pilot and received this email from an airport manager about an issue that has been a growing problem for years in the Bay Area and is now growing even worse. San Carlos Airport is an airport within 10 miles of San Francisco International Airport, and it will have no air traffic controllers starting on February 1st. The departure route for San Carlos directly overlaps the arrival path of San Francisco. San Carlos also hosts two of the area's largest flight schools. This means you now have a situation where inexperienced pilots will be departing into a highly complex airspace using solely their own judgment and reading of charts so as to not collide with aircraft landing at San Francisco. This happened because the airport operates off an FAA contract for staffing controllers rather than the FAA directly providing controllers. This system has always been tenuous. It was previously not uncommon for the contractor to only provide a single controller for all traffic. There are recordings on YouTube of the tower needing to shut down because the controller had to use the bathroom and no one else was working. Now, a new contractor has underbid the existing and decided to remove cost of living adjustments for staff. All controllers have left, and the new contractor plans to operate the airport with no controllers. This means the pilots need to coordinate with each other instead. I've been disturbed by the operation of contract towers ever since becoming a pilot. During the first Trump administration, I feared what privatization of all air traffic control would bring. After Trump posted about air traffic control being at fault in last night's mid-air collision in D.C., I'm concerned they will use this as a springboard to push for more private towers. I write this to you to say this will bring more safety risks, and more people need to understand a real-life example of what chaos a contract tower can create when put in such busy and complicated airspace. Private interests taking over and cutting corners, cutting costs, laying people off, and to the point in this case where there's no air traffic controller, putting everybody else at risk for their own short-term bottom line. This is the biggest issue when it comes to someone like Trump, who's packed his cabinet people around him, billionaires, the wealthiest people on the planet. They have a particular worldview. Their worldview is through the eyes of corporate interests, through the eyes of deregulation, small government. They're going to continue down this path as much as they possibly can.